I'm in an earlier stage of my career than the great Willem Dafoe. But
Hey Blenders, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing editor at CinemaBlend and a co-host of the ReelBlend podcast. I hope everybody is enjoying some time off with friends and family during this holiday season, but we wanted to bring you guys, while you're shopping or going through those last minute holiday details, maybe you want to throw on a podcast and listen to an interview that we were able to do on behalf of the new film Nosferatu by Robert Eggers. We have two of the film's stars, the great Willem Dafoe and the outstanding Bill Skarsgård, who plays Nosferatu in the film. Tried hard to get Eggers on this, but jumped at the opportunity to get a chance to speak with these two actors. Very, very important to the overall impact of the film. Obviously, with Willem having some history with the Nosferatu role, the Dracula character, and he talks about that a bit in the podcast. And then Bill and the amount of work that he put into bringing this iconic character to life on screen. Obviously, Bill has some experience with this, doing Pennywise in the Andy Muschietti adaptations of the Stephen King book It. He was in The Crow also earlier this year, but he's ending the year really strong with Nosferatu, and we were thrilled to get these guys on. Normally we have stuff drop on a Wednesday. Obviously, this week being Christmas, we knew that was going to be a really important day for everybody, so we wanted you guys to have this one early. So this is, again, without further ado, the ReelBlend interview on behalf of Nosferatu with actors Willem Dafoe and Bill Skarsgård, ready to go into your ears.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you for taking the time. And I'm going to start out with a big nerdy question. I feel like one of the commonalities between the original 22 film and this film, and even Shadow the Vampire, is the practical shadow work. I'm sort of in awe of watching it work, knowing that most of them, I believe, are done in real life or done practically. I'd love to know each of your own experiences in the shadow work on this film and in Shadow the Vampire. And is there anything that you sort of impressed you, sort of seeing it actually happen and not really, as far as I know, need CGI in a way?
Yeah, it's the I'll let you know that all the shadow work in the movie is performed by me. And it was interesting, and of course, like, you know, you sit by yourself at home trying to like do it, yeah. but it's, this movie is so incredibly practical. Like, there's very little CGI, and Robert tries to capture as much as he can within the frame. So yeah, I would be sitting like behind the camera, and they had rigged the Sharon's beautifully lit sort of rig of the shadow coming up, and I would watch Lily Rose Depp's beautiful performance, and just kind of you know, out of all of the days shooting, those were the most relaxed from my perspective.
You mentioned being at home and practice. Like, is that like a real thing? Do you really go home and try to figure out like what the shadow of your own hand is going to look like?
Yeah. And we also, yes. And we had camera tests that was specifically for the shadow work. So with Robert and Jared, the cinematographer, and we were like, okay, and like, how, you know, we're everything had to be figured out beforehand. So it was actually a lot of work going into it. And then how the hand moves, and you know, the extensions of the fingers, and you know, voila, you know.
It's unbelievable. I know that technology and movie making is always changing and it's always evolving, but I am sort of curious if there's some degree of commonality of things that just are the way they are and they don't have to change that much. So Mr. Dafoe, I'd love to know, I'm sure you've heard Bill talk a lot about his makeup process, and I was wondering if it was at all comparable to what you went through when you played Max Schreck. Was there any sort of, is there that big of a difference in 20 years of filmmaking advancement, or do you think his experience was a little similar to yours?
It sounds similar. Just if you, I mean, they're different characters, and the application is different. And his was a full body thing, but the time was similar. And you know, obviously, some things have been probably improved as far as, you know, certain applications and that sort of thing. But as far as the application generally, yeah, a lot of time spent putting pieces on you and then painting them and then blending them and, things for the hands, the fingernails, things for the body, corsets, things like that. It's similar. I mean, believe me, I thought Bill in the chair.
You mentioned that you said that there are probably some advancements that have been made. Nicholas told me something, Bill, I'm sort of curious. He said that there is like a hole that they have to punch in because by nature of being buried under all this makeup, you start to sweat. And he said whenever he did X-Men that they had to sort of poke a hole in the makeup to let the sweat out. I'm sort of curious if they did that for you as well. And is that a fairly new development? I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, Nick was, he's such a sweet guy, and he was, when we were on set, first, second day of shooting, and the long scene where Orlok is introduced to, or where Thomas is introduced to Orlok rather, and he would just go, "Hey, Bill, between takes, do you want to? Where's your hole?" I was like, I know how uncomfortable this is, and it's like, he was like very compassionate about what I was going through, and I was just sitting there going, "Do you want some water, Bill?" And I'm like, "Leave me alone." But he was very sweet about it because he had done it. And so he knows how uncomfortable it can be. In terms of the sweat, not on the face, there was nothing on the face. Everything is like, I'm covered in latex, full body. It's the only surface of me is my eyeballs and the soles of my feet. That was the only thing, and everything was covered. And when we were doing the sort of the finale of the final moment of the movie, we did 30 takes of it, and without spoiling it, it's a lot of physical performance. So you're completely exhausted and you're sweating through. And what started happening, because there was nowhere for the sweat to escape, it just created this just giant bubble on my stomach. Like it just started growing like a tumor. And then between takes, they had to pierce it. And just like.
Hollywood's so glamorous.
Oh yes. And then on top of that, fake blood and sweat and saliva, and it was a gory mess.
I really need to see like the behind the scenes, like Heart of Darkness documentary about the making of this movie. I asked Mr. Eggers a similar question, but because of you guys have this amazing connection, I'd love to ask both of you, if you could sit down and ask Max Schreck anything, what is the thing that you would ask him about this character, just to get his perspective on what he thought the character was, or how he thought he was going to approach the character?
Are you a real vampire, Max Schreck?
I saw a movie about that once.
Yeah.
I don't know. Max Schreck was famous for being a journeyman actor that did lots of things. And he, after Nosferatu was done, he lamented that he couldn't get work anymore because he was so, even though he was very much covered in makeup, he was totally associated with that character, and it kind of destroyed his career.
And he passed away not long after, right, in the 30s, or like 10 years passed or something. It was like early era film making, and like, I don't know what I would have asked.
The makeup killed him.
The makeup killed him. Exactly.
That's an interesting fear, though, that I feel like sometimes we don't really think about from our perspective. Is that an ever constant fear as an actor to be? I mean, you guys have done so much work now that I don't really think it's anything that you guys have to worry about. But when you start out in the business, is there that conscious fear of like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm not just this one guy?
Oh, you mean as far as, I think I experienced that when I was younger. I mean, when I first started out, everybody wanted to cast me as a bad guy. And that was fun.
Relatable.
Yeah, that was fun because, it's kind of a guilty pleasure, and you have strong actions. And if you aren't conventionally handsome or conventionally, if you aren't the boy next door, it's sometimes the juiciest roles, the most active roles, the most dramatic roles are the bad guys. So I didn't mind it, but you like to, challenge yourself, and you like to have the possibility, not as a vanity thing, but, to think that, you can be flexible. You can experience different things. That's one of the beautiful things of being an actor. You get to imagine being other people, or imagine other people's, lives. So at the beginning, I was very conscious of that. And also I was working with a theater company, so I had to really be careful about selection, because I couldn't go away from the theater much. But then that changed with time. I felt like because I mixed it up, big films and small films, it was able to break that a little bit. But still, it depends, for larger films, they kind of want you to do that thing that you think, that thing that you do, or that thing that they think is coming off you. And then your opportunities tend to be more independent movies. But with time, some of those independent movies break through, and people start to imagine you in other ways, to see you broader.
Yeah, and I'm in an earlier stage of my career than the great Willem Dafoe. But and I get the question, like I keep getting this question. It's like, oh, are you the horror guy? Or are you just gonna, whatever? And I'm like, I've done, most of my movies are not horror films.
Yeah.
But those are the ones that break through. And I have done a lot of darker roles and sort of anti-heroes or villains or whatever, but also a lot of other roles. But I think for me, and this has been a thing for me, at least growing up, and my approach to acting is like I really never wanted to be vain and be a vain performer. So I never understood actors who wanted to play the cool guy or wanted to be the man, and they were only seeking out characters that made them look good as people,
right.
And that kind of vanity, and that was something that I saw in actors working, and I work with actors that are like that, and I was like, I don't want to be that. So almost kind of counteracting that to exploring the weird people, the people that are wrong, that are off, that are outsiders, that are rejects, that are I feel like I've
different perspective
and complicated perspective, morally complicated perspective is what is inspiring to me, and I don't want don't want to be ruled by vanity or ego in that sense.
I'm totally down with what he's saying. Yeah. And the other thing is, generally, there are lots of shades in between, but the black and white of it is some actors, and I don't have a judgment about this because they're both, good ways to go. Some actors really want to kind of create a persona, and they seek material that supports that persona. And sometimes they can use it beautifully. Mm-hmm. They can use that iconographically and use it to make some wonderful movies. But it sounds like, from what Bill just said, and I relate to this, I'm the other kind of actor that really wants to bend myself to the material. Mm-hmm. Go to the material rather than have the material support me. In fact, sometimes I even like to go towards stuff that I don't quite relate to, but there's a little itch there. There's something that's curious about it, or maybe the director is really interesting and I don't quite get it, but I want to go towards it. And that going towards that usually provides you with a kind of adventure and something that really ultimately engages you, rather than presenting something that you can do, or something that you just enjoy immediately, or you're going to be good at. It's an interesting game. Different people play it different ways, and that I had no problem with that. But I think I noticed that it makes me nervous when stuff is too perfect for me. Like, this is made for you. This is who you are. You know, this is what you'd be really good at. That's why often when people say, hey, what kind of role do you want to play? And it's like, I don't know. I want to play the role that I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons, I'm not blowing smoke, but one of the reasons I love
Blowing smoke.
I promise him, like, whenever I know that you're casting a part and you're going to be in a movie I'm about to see, I get excited because I think I can't wait to see what they're going to do with this part. Not I'm excited because I know what they're going to do. It's more I'm excited because I don't know what they're going to do. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for answering that. I think one of the most interesting things about the original 22 Nosferatu is whether people realize it or not, how big of an influence it's had on pop culture. I did not realize that the whole vampire dying because of sunlight came from Nosferatu, did not come from Bram Stoker's Dracula novel. And I think one of my original introductions to the character into Max Schreck was Christopher Walken played a character named Max Schreck in a Batman film, which at the time I had no idea. Do you think that more, even though I would argue a lot of people probably have not seen the original 22 film, people are impacted by its influence without maybe even realizing that they're impacted by its influence?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. It's seminal, and my dad introduced me to the 1922 movie when I was a kid, and we would watch movies, and he would show me movies that he liked, and sort of and we had a sort of phase of watching silent film movies, and mostly Chaplin and like Buster Keaton and stuff like that. But then we also watched Nosferatu, and he contextualized it for me as a child, explain to me what the fact that all the negatives were ordered to be burnt because it was copyright infringement on Bram Stoker's novel, but some of them survived, and it changed film history forever. Like, not only is it probably the first horror film ever made, it's a time that only 10 years before the movie came out, there's this, the infamous story of the train coming towards this, and everybody in the audience are running out thinking that the train's going to run them over. So within that context, and then you look at this movie and how genuinely terrifying it still is. Like, you can only imagine what this how new this medium was, and people had never been scared in that way, and monsters, prosthetics, everything. It's in a lot of ways, it's the birth of horror film cinema.
One of the interesting things working on this is because Robert is so well researched, and so much in this Nosferatu is really based on folk legends and tales from a time where people really believed in vampires. So it's very rooted in fact, and that against the cinema tropes of vampires that have been created through the years has been really fascinating. Probably one of the greatest examples is there's no evidence, it's total invented, that vampires drink blood from the neck, for example, where there is some historical fact that people believed they used to drink from the chest, which is nice because the heart and little things like that. It's interesting to see what was created for the purposes of cinema and what was rooted in the beliefs of the people, and how the origins of these things. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
I love. No, please.
No, I was just gonna add to it, and I mean that is what our Orlock is. It's in approaching the material and getting access to a lot of the research that Robert had done. I read the script before I did the research many years ago, and then I started researching it, and I'm like, oh, okay, yes, a naked maiden on a horse. Like, this is like all of these things that you see in the film are actual, based off of Transylvanian folklore, Robert wanted to use the Transylvanian folkloric beliefs, and then combining it with Nosferatu or Dracula, really, who's who's a character that's not of Transylvanian folklore, everything from how the character looks and how he feeds and all of that is inspired and based off of actual folkloric beliefs, and that those blending those together is the result of the character that you see, which is why it's a unique interpretation of Dracula and portrayal of that character.
Well, you mentioned I perfectly leads into, because I had to talk about the feeding, the fact that Count Orlok feeds from the chest, which I think has yielded probably maybe the best sound design of any movie this year. Just the sound of him feeding is. Yeah, it's the greatest. I'd love to know the first time you guys heard that. Was it in the finished product? And also, Bill, just the physicality of doing that. It is a physical act, man. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, the physical act was like, and I think it's one of the scariest images of the film is when the full body shot of Orlok feeding on Thomas, it was 6 hours in the chair, and it was one setup. So we came in, the camera was, this is the frame. So it was 6 hours in the chair. We shot it in 30 minutes, and then I was done. But in terms of what I was doing in performing it, it's the movement of the body, of just seeing this leech-like thing pulsating. Was what we wanted to achieve, and that's what we worked on for it, and it looked absolutely horrific. I mean, I would go and look at the monitors, and because when you do something that is that sort of physically performative, it's good to go and look at the monitor, go, oh, I see that my hip is too high or whatever, and Robert would explain, and you kind of dial in the performance to be as effective as possible. But it looked absolutely horrific. But then when you see the movie and you add the sound to it, it's just like, well,
Do you have any?
I've seen it when I was with audiences, and Alita, my partner, and she watched it, and that was like, oh, she was so incredibly repulsed by it, like she couldn't watch it. She couldn't really watch it. She was sitting like this the whole film.
Is that the ultimate review whenever you bring when you bring a loved one and then they turn away? Is that the ultimate, like, oh, we got it?
I mean, it's people are different, right? Like some people turn away, and some people actually lean in. So yeah.
I'm the lean in type for whatever reason, for all that implies.
Me too. I tend to lean in.
Obviously, this is a character that, by nature of having seen it a couple of times over the last 100 plus years, we've gotten different filmmakers' interpretation, different actors' interpretation. So that yields a bigger question, Mr. Dafoe. And you may very well hate this question. I would love to know a character that you've played that you would just love to see how another actor might interpret that person in 100 years or so.
Oh, Jesus, there's too much imagination in that question. I don't know.
It's a great question.
I'll be dead. I don't care.
Hypothetically, if you could
have at it. Yeah, go. Do them all. Have fun. Enjoy. Don't worry about me. I'm just resting.
I shouldn't have said 100 years. I messed up the question right there.
No, I wish I was clever, but I'm not clever that way. I save any little cleverness I have for other things. Sorry.
Fair enough. I figured you guys are in the middle of long press days trying to throw some stuff at you that you haven't heard 10,000 times.
It's good. It's just
yeah, I'm thinking about it too. I would like to see, or I would like to dare to play, or whatever, in Willem's wonderful repertoire. I mean,
would Lily be playing? Yes, too. Let's do a little gender shift.
Yeah,
and you play Lily's role.
Yes.
I'm down for this. I want to talk about, as an actor, when you are developing a voice, not necessarily the craft of doing it, but I'd love to know when you guys know it's time to stop, because, they often, filmmakers often talk about, well, I'm not done with the movie, but it had to be out by a certain date. Or whenever I edit news stories, I always think I could keep editing this story, but it's got to air on Tuesday. At what point do you know I've got it and I'm done? I don't need to work on it anymore.
For me, on this one, like never, like I never felt that was done. And I think that, I wanted to, I wanted the voice to be performed the way it was going to play. Like, because we were talking about like, we could digitally lower it or enhance it post. And I was like, okay. And I just didn't like the idea of it. Like, I wanted to achieve it as I wanted to achieve reaching there myself. But I was also like, when we were shooting and I was like, I knew that we could go into the ADR studio and like redo all the dialogue and like get it as perfect as possible or whatever. And I was actually surprised how little I had to ADR and how much of the performance is there. And Robert, I didn't ADR much of any dialogue. So the dialogue that's in the movies, most of it is recorded in front of the camera on the stage. And that was kind of I don't know, that I was happy that I reached it there. But in terms of what I never felt like I and even when we were doing it, I'm like, I fucking have gotten this better at home. And like, when I'm lying down and I can really access the whole body and make it resonate. And so with this one, I never felt that it was whatever the process. Yeah.
I got to tell you, it's such a good voice that the first time I heard it, my knee-jerk reaction was, oh, did they get someone else to do his voice? Like, did they not let Bill do it? Like, that's kind of a I hope you take that in the compliment the way it's like, I just didn't think that was in any way possibly you.
Yeah. We had a little sort of a private premiere in Stockholm with friends and family, and there was a lot of friends of mine who were like, so like, who did the voice? I was like, what did you think I was doing? Just a model.
I'll get you guys out of here on this. You mentioned, growing up watching silent films and the silent film stars. I'd love to talk about the value of silence for an actor. When you're given a moment without dialogue and you're left to just your eyes or your face or your body language, how much of a challenge is that compared to having 3 pages worth of dialogue to get your point across?
I never think about getting my point across. I think about, engaging with certain actions or certain situations. So, the truth is there's that classic thing where they say, if you can turn the sound off on a movie and know what's going on, then, it's a good movie. It's a whole package. It doesn't cut up. But, it's like, because you have dialogue doesn't mean you're leading with the voice. Your body is also engaged. Even though you're silent, your voice is still there. I don't know how to say it. It's not a black or white thing. I don't think you really treat a silent movie any different. You may lean on more gestural language, but still, how you're sending it out there, or what you're trying to accomplish, is probably about the same thing. Because it never works for me. One of the biggest difficulties in performing is when you've got to express something, to not indicate it, to live it, not indicate it, not point to it, not show it, but do it. And there's a huge difference in that. So whether it's silent or whether there's text is an action. Text is a gesture too. The idea of I don't make that much difference. It's all performing. It's just the mode is different, but the being there and what you're trying to accomplish is exactly the same, I think.
Have you must have worked with directors that one likes to do a silent take? Have you ever, like, you do the take without the dialogue?
No,
you never had? Oh, okay.
That sounds like good.
Yeah,
Good exercise.
yeah. I work with the director who would do that. He would just, you would do the scene, and then we're like, okay, let's do one silent. So you do the scene without the dialogue.
That's a good idea.
And it's a fun exercise, and it's also good for coverage because you get reactions. I mean, you can use all of these reactions in the presence of being there, and it's just interesting to kind of to feel out a scene without the dialogue and feel sort of the physical elements of a scene and how you're performing it. I mean, I did a movie a couple years ago, the A Boy Kills World, where I'm mute and I don't have like it's a silent performance on my part, and that was interesting. And I would, for those scenes, because he's speaking through his mind through voiceover, I would do the scene, perform the scene with the dialogue that's being read in the voiceover, and I would speak it, and then we would go again, and then I would redo it silently. And then you do rely on different tools, like expressions become more important, and it's a little bit bigger, and you for sure see it in silent film era actors. Nothing subtle about it. It's very animated theatrical performances, because they didn't have the language to communicate through. And it's fun. I mean, when you did Shadow of a Vampire,
right.
You were like, I think you can see in that in the way you performed it as well, that there is a silent film era expressiveness.
Yeah. Yes, but when you talk about silent film, the traditions were just different.
Yeah,
I mean, because things are pitched for an audience a little bit. I don't know what things have changed as far in terms of psychology and storytelling, and also just film language. It's so hard to compare.
Yeah, but you have like Joan of Arc, called Dre, or like that kind of super, that naturalistic, gorgeous performance from a non-actor. Actually,
it's true. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Guys, this was my dream interview. Seriously, thank you guys for geeking out with me, for having just an awesome, just cinema movie conversation. I love both of you guys. I love your work in this film, and I appreciate you indulging my nerdy questions. You guys were truly fantastic. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Good to see you guys. Take care.
Bye.
You too.
We want to thank our good friends at Focus Features and, of course, Willem and Bill for coming on the ReelBlend podcast. Thrilled to have them on. They're welcome back anytime. You guys should definitely check out Nosferatu as it's making its way out to theaters. Kind of an unusual Christmas movie, I'll admit that, but a little counter programming if you're tired of the Christmas staples, be it A Christmas Story or maybe Christmas Vacation. You guys want to head out, see something different, get into some gothic horror, filtered through the eyes, the very unique eyes of the director of The Lighthouse and The Northman. And you're absolutely going to want to see well, you know what? Actually, with this one, you're going to want to hear it. If you can go see Nosferatu, I would recommend you go see it in Dolby Atmos, because the way that they manipulate Skarsgård's voice, and the work that he's doing on his own as well, too, as discussed in the interview, is really spectacular and really unnerving, and makes really great use of the sound mix, which is, again, something that we talk about a lot on the show, is taking advantage of the tools that are available to a filmmaker, be it cinematography or lighting, which is also really important to Nosferatu, and the sound mix. So go see this one in Dolby. We do have an episode coming out on the 27th, so you want to make sure you're here for that. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We have Helena Rain, who is returning to the show. We had her on to discuss her horror film Bodies, and now she has another movie coming to theaters, which you might have heard about, with Nicole Kidman, called Baby Girl. More counter programming for the holiday season. Not necessarily one for the family, but one you're going to want to hear her discuss. So be back here when that episode drops to make sure you don't miss it. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Thank you guys so much for supporting ReelBlend throughout the year. That'll be our last episode dropping in 2024. Officially, we'll be back with brand new episodes in 2025. Heading into the year really, really strong and anticipating some really cool things, thanks to the support of you guys here in the ReelBlend community. We appreciate you so much. Have a really wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year to everybody, and we will see you in January.